everyone, and welcome to lesson 7.2C. I've entitled this video, Compromises, Compromises. This video is going to cover pages 190 to 191. Agreeing to compromise. The delegates had to decide whether to revise the Articles of Confederation or write a new constitution. On June 19th, the states voted to work toward a new constitution based on the Virginia Plan. They still had to deal with the difficult issue of representation that divided the large and small states. Question 1. What important decision did the delegates make on June 19, 1787? They decided, we're not going to try to fix the Articles of Confederation, we're going to make a brand new constitution. The Great Compromise. The convention appointed a committee to settle the disagreement. Roger Sherman of Connecticut suggested what would later be called the Great Compromise. A compromise is a settlement of a dispute by each party giving up some demands. Sherman's compromise proposed different representation in the two-house legislature, or bicameral. In the upper house, the Senate, each state would have 2 members. That is, the states would be equal in representation. In the lower house, the House of Representatives, the number of seats for each state would vary based on the state's population. Larger states would have more representation. Question number 3. We have heard this word before. What does the word compromise mean? It is a settlement of a dispute by each party giving up some demands. You have to give up a little to get a little. Question number 4. According to the Great Compromise, what would the upper house of legislature be called? The Senate. Question 5. According to the Great Compromise, how many senators would each state get? Each state would get 2 senators. Question 6. Which states would have liked that part of the plan? The states with smaller populations at that time, like New Jersey, because they would be equal with the larger populated states like Virginia, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. Question number 7. According to the Great Compromise, what would the lower house of legislature be called? The House of Representatives. Question number 8. According to the Great Compromise, how would the number of representatives each state would receive in the House of Representatives be determined? That would be determined based on the state's population. Question 9. What states would have liked that part of the plan? The states with bigger populations, like Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. The 3/5 Compromise. Delegates from the South and North disagreed on whether and how to count each state's enslaved population. Including enslaved people as part of a state's population would increase each southern state's size. This would give southern states more seats in Congress. The southern states liked this, and the northern states did not. At the same time, larger populations would increase each southern state's taxes because states were to be taxed based on their populations. The South was not happy about this. As a solution to this dispute, delegates agreed to what was called the 3/5 Compromise. As part of this compromise, every 5 enslaved persons would count as 3 persons in the state's population total. This population total would be the basis for settling taxes and representation in Congress. Question number 10. Why did the southern states and northern states disagree on how slaves would be counted for a state's population count? Well, the North is like, come on now, South, you can't have it both ways. You are not treating these people as people. You're treating them as property. So if you're going to count them as property, then how can you treat them as population for your population count? And the South wasn't having any part of that. Question number 11. What was the 3/5 Compromise? The 3/5 Compromise was how the 2 sides settled the dispute. The South said, well, we want them to count, and the North said, we don't want them to count, and so you have to come to some sort of solution. And so 3/5 of the slaves would count as population, and 2/5 would not. So yes, this shows you just how crazy, foolish it was back then to count a person as 3/5 of a person. But that is the compromise the Founding Fathers put in place to move the compromises forward. And here we see a picture of the 3/5 compromise. This lays it out in a nice feature. You can pause the video at this time if you want to take a closer look at this and take it all in. It even gives you an example here of how it would work for a state such as Virginia at that time. If you don't wish to learn more about this, then I'm going to move on in the video. The question of the slave trade. The northern states had already banned the slave trade. They wanted to prohibit it nationwide. Southern states considered slavery central to their economy. Northerners agreed to keep the new Congress from interfering with the slave trade until 1808. Question number 12. How did the northern states and southern states compromise on the issue of the slave trade? Well, both sides saw a victory and a defeat in this. So for the North, saying we won't touch your slave trade until 1808, well, if you notice, at 1808, they would end the slave trade. So the North was going to get what they wanted eventually. The South, in their mind, they're like, well, if we can at least have the slave trade happen for the next 2 decades or so, or longer, then maybe the North will, not think this is a big deal in 2 decades, or even at that point, a lot of these people would already be dead, because 20 years from that, they would be in their 50s or 60s or even 70s, and many people back then didn't live that long. So for the founding fathers who agreed to this from the South, their thought was, well, we're getting it for another 2 decades, and who knows what'll happen, but at least we're getting it now. So that's how they were able to compromise on the slave trade. Debating a Bill of Rights. State constitutions such as those of Virginia and Massachusetts had a listing of key rights and freedoms. These are known as a Declaration of Rights or a Bill of Rights. At the convention, some delegates worried that without a Bill of Rights, the new national government might abuse its power. George Mason of Virginia proposed a Bill of Rights to be included in the Constitution. The delegates defeated this idea. Most of the delegates believed that the Constitution carefully defined government powers and provided enough protection of individual rights. Question number 13. What is a Bill of Rights? A Bill of Rights is a listing of key rights and freedoms, protections for the people. Question 14. What did George Mason of Virginia fight to have included in the Constitution? He wanted to have a Bill of Rights added to the Constitution. Approving the Constitution. On September 17, 1787, the delegates assembled to sign the Constitution they had created. 3 delegates refused to sign: Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts and Edmund Randolph and George Mason of Virginia. Gerry and Mason would not sign because the Constitution did not have a Bill of Rights. Randolph, not Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Randolph, who had put forth the Virginia plan, felt the final document strayed too far from his own beliefs. The other delegates did sign the document. The approval draft of the Constitution went out to the states for their approval. Under the Articles of Confederation, all 13 states would have to have accepted any change. The drafters of the new Constitution decided, however, that the document would go into effect with the approval of just 9 of the 13 states. Question number 15. On what date was the United States Constitution signed? September 17th, 1787. Question 16. Why did Elbridge Gerry, Edmund Randolph, and George Mason refuse to sign? Well, they refused to sign because they didn't like what they saw. For Gerry and Mason, it didn't have a Bill of Rights. For Randolph, he felt like it had gone too far away from his original ideas. Question 17. Under the old Articles of Confederation, how many states would have to accept the changes made by the Constitution? All 13. Question 18. However, according to the new U.S. Constitution, how many states would have to accept it for it to go into effect? Just 9. Well, thank you so much for watching. Before we go, I have a meme. Constitutional Convention. We need to change the AOC ASAP. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.